Thus, I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Kosambyia in Gosita's park. Now, on that occasion, monks at Kosambyia had taken to quarreling and brawling and were in deep disputes, stabbing each other with verbal daggers. They could neither convince each other nor be convinced by others. They could neither persuade each other nor be persuaded by others. What they were fighting about was really trivial. There was a Sutta teacher that had his monastery in the town. There was a Vinaya teacher that had his monastery in the town. The Sutta teacher went to visit the Vinaya teacher. And after they ate, the Sutta teacher needed to use the toilet. So he went and used the toilet and he cleaned himself with water. He left a little bit of water in the cup. Right after he had gone to the toilet, the Vinaya teacher went to the toilet and he saw the water sitting in the cup and he said, "That's a break in Vinaya." So when he came back, he told the monk, the Sutta monk, "You've broken the Vinaya and you need to confess it." And he said, "How did I break the Vinaya?" And the monk said, "Well, you left water standing in this cup. Always when you get done, you're supposed to turn the cup upside down or else beings will start growing in the cup." "Oh, I didn't realize that. Please accept my apology." And when the Sutta monk left, the Vinaya monk got his monks together and started criticizing the Sutta monk. How could he not know that that was a break in Vinaya? And the Vinaya students, when they went out on alms round the next day, whenever they saw the Sutta students, they would laugh at him and make fun and tell him how stupid his teacher is because he broke the Vinaya. And of course that caused repercussions and they started quarreling about it. And it got so bad that eventually the Buddha, who was supposed to stay there for the rains retreat, left. And the people of Kosambyia got real upset with these monks because every time they saw each other, they would have verbal daggers and say hurtful things. So the people of Kosambyia agreed they weren't going to feed the monks until they stopped doing that sort of thing. Now this was the rains retreat. The monks had to stay there for 3 months. That's part of the rules. So when they didn't get very much food at all, they started deciding, well, maybe it's a good idea if we start making up and not quarreling and brawling, because the Buddha had given a bunch of discourses on how to be in communion with each other, not fighting, but they didn't pay attention to that. Sometimes monks can be very stubborn. Anyway, when the Buddha left, he wound up spending the rains retreat in the forest alone, and he was attended to by a monkey and an elephant. The elephant would go get water and put it in a place where he could take a bath. And the monkey would always be giving him fruit, things that he could climb up in the tree and get. So that's what his attendants were, a monkey and an elephant. And he stayed that way for 3 months, quite content not to be around human beings very much. Anyway.
Where did he get food?
There's a village not far away. But the monkey kept on bringing him and offering properly with 2 hands the bananas and mangoes and nuts and things like that, coconuts. Then a certain monk went to the Blessed One after paying homage to him, sat down at one side, and informed him what was happening. The Blessed One addressed a certain monk thus, "Come, monk, tell those monks in my name that the teacher calls them." "Yes, venerable sir," he replied. And he went to those monks and told them, "The teacher calls you, venerable ones." "Yes, friend," they replied. They went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, they sat down at one side. The Blessed One then asked them, "Monks, is it true that you've taken to quarreling and brawling and are in deep disputes, stabbing each other with verbal daggers? That you can neither convince each other nor be convinced by others? That you can neither persuade each other nor be persuaded by others?" "Yes, venerable sir." "Monks, what do you think? When you take to quarreling and brawling and are in deep disputes, stabbing each other with verbal daggers, do you on that occasion maintain acts of loving kindness in body, speech, and mind, in public and in private, towards your companions in the holy life?" "No, venerable sir." "So, monks, when you take to quarreling and brawling and are in deep dispute, stabbing each other with verbal daggers, on that occasion you do not maintain acts of loving kindness by body, speech, and mind, in public and in private, towards your companions in the holy life." "Misguided men, what can you possibly know? What can you possibly see that you take to quarreling and brawling and are in deep dispute, stabbing each other with verbal daggers? That you can neither convince each other nor be convinced by others? That you can neither persuade each other, be persuaded by others? Misguided men, that will lead to your harm and suffering for a long time." And they found out later they got pretty hungry because of that. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, "Monks, there are these 6 principles of cordiality that create love and respect and conduce to cohesion, to non-dispute, to concord, and to unity." What are the 6? Here a monk maintains acts of loving kindness, both in public and private, towards his companions in the holy life. This is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to cohesion, to non-dispute, to concord, and to unity. Again, a monk maintains verbal acts of loving kindness, both in public and in private, towards his companions in the holy life. This too leads to cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to unity. Again, monks. A monk maintains mental acts of loving kindness, both in public and in private, towards his companions in the holy life. This too is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to unity. So, he's not talking about just sitting in meditation. He's talking about practicing loving kindness all the time. You don't think of or you don't spend time thinking of another person's faults. You have compassion for them. What is compassion? Compassion is seeing another person suffering, allowing them to have their own suffering, and send them loving kindness no matter what. It doesn't matter what they say, it doesn't matter what they do. And this works. It works very well. I was in Hawaii, I was reading a book on the beach, and these teenagers, there was 10 or 12 of them, decided that they wanted to beat me up. And the leader jumped across me, kicking sand on me, and kicked me. So I got up and I said, "Don't do that again." And all of a sudden, all these guys are around me. And I saw them building up, getting ready to get into violence. They were getting into their anger. And I know how painful anger can be. So I recognized that in them. And I just started radiating loving kindness. And I was looking the leader in the eye, radiating loving kindness, and before long he just shakes his head and walks away. And all of the rest of the people did too. This stuff works. So you have to remember that you need to send loving and kind thoughts all the time. That's why I want you to smile all the time. That's why I want you to not get serious with anything. Just soften your mind, radiate that loving kindness as much as you can. People that get into arguments, whether you're part of the argument or not, doesn't matter. You see some people that are starting to raise their voice and yell at each other, you radiate loving kindness, and before long, that changes. So it's a real important aspect of the practice. Do you want to affect the world around you in a positive way or negative way? If you want to do it in a negative way, go kick one of the dogs. But look out for the repercussions. So it's a real interesting thing that when you get off retreat, you're learning how to do this right now. But when you get into situations in your daily life, you have to remember to practice. That's why I don't care what you're doing, you stay with your object of meditation. I used to spend a lot of time going to hospitals. People would invite me to come because one of their relatives was sick. Sometimes they were sick and dying. And they would be in a lot of pain. So on the way through the hallways, walking to the person's room, I would start remembering that their pain is theirs. I can't take their pain away. If they have cancer, I can't take their cancer away. But I can love them. And when I walk into the room, quite often the relatives are sitting around and they're talked out, but they feel like they need to be there. But they feel very helpless, especially if that person is really suffering a lot of pain. You don't ever have to be helpless in any situation. The more you practice smiling, letting go with the 6 R's, relaxing into things, you're doing something that affects everybody in the room. A lot of people, and I've seen it, I don't know how many times, they didn't have air conditioning in the hospital that I went to in Kuala Lumpur at that time. And somebody would come in and they would open a closed window or close an open window, and they'd fluff up a pillow and they'd fix the blankets, and then they would get up and it's time to leave. They felt very helpless, and they were taking pity on the person that was suffering. Pity is the negative aspect of loving kindness. Trying to take somebody else's pain away. You're not practicing compassion, you're practicing pity. And that makes you feel bad and makes everybody else feel bad. So what good is that? If you want to change the world in a positive way, you need to practice loving kindness. No matter what the situation. If somebody's yelling at you, you can have compassion. You can see that they're really upset. You know what it feels like to be upset? It's painful. So, you start radiating loving kindness to them. You start allowing that to be. And before long, they will settle down and begin to discuss what the real problem is, because it's not the problem that they're yelling about. That's just emotional nonsense. And it really is nonsense. So, if you want to affect the world around you in a positive way, if you want to be a healer instead of a person causing pain to others, you need to practice your compassion. Now, I've read a lot of different articles on what people think compassion is. And I helped set up a hospice in Southern California. And some of these people that were going to visit somebody that was sick, we had a meeting once a week, and we would all get together and discuss what was happening. And you'd hear how they were starting to get burned out because they had so much pain being with other people that had pain. I was in Hawaii for a couple of years, and I left Hawaii and came back to the mainland, mainly because I wanted to be with people as they were dying. I wanted to see if they had visions. I wanted to be with them to help them have a good rebirth. My mother ran a nursing home for 20 years. There was about one person a week that died. And she was so familiar with the signs of people dying that she would tell me, well, this person in the next 2 or 3 days, they're going to expire because they quit drinking water. And they weren't eating any food. So I'd go hang out with them day and night, just being there. If they needed anything, I made sure they had it. I spent time talking to them and reading from the Bible because that's what they were used to. I wasn't there to convince them of anything. And their minds became peaceful and calm. Right before they died, I told them to remember times when they were happy and they were generous and they helped other people to smile. And when they started remembering that, their minds became uplifted. Now, an interesting thing in the Bible is it has the precepts in the Bible. Don't hear about that very much. They're the ministers in the churches that I visited didn't have a clue about the strength of keeping your precepts. When somebody is close to death, even if they're in a coma, they're still there. They're hearing what you say, they just don't have enough strength to answer or to talk with you. So I tell them in their mind, follow what I'm saying and repeat it in your mind. And I gave them the 5 precepts. Now there's a section in the Anguttara Nikaya, and it has to do with the different kind of visions that people have right before they die. And it's not very well known. Sometimes people will have visions of past relatives that have died, and it's like they come and they start visiting and they talk, and they might start talking, and you say, who are you talking to? Oh, I'm talking to these people here, but you can't see it. Don't say there's something wrong with them. Encourage them to remember times when they were happy with those people that are coming to visit. They will, if they die at that time with that kind of vision, they will be reborn as a human being. Now, mind is pretty tricky. Sometimes you can have a thought, like I read this story about this monk that went to a house to be with a person as they were dying. And they just bought a new mattress new mat that they were laying on. And when I think this was in Bangladesh, I'm not real sure, But the custom was that all of their clothes and all of their blankets and mattresses got burned up with the body when they cremated it. And this one man that was real close to death, he started thinking about the new mattress that he was on, and he didn't want to die on that mattress. He wanted to get it changed. And then he started talking about the vision that he had. And he saw a black, hairy, big, kind of like an ogre, that started dragging him by his foot in his mind's eye, dragging him away. And he said something about that to the monk, and the monk gave him the precepts, and that vision went away. So he had he had the opportunity, if he died at that time, to become a hungry ghost because of his greed in his mind at that time. If there's dissatisfaction at that time, if there's dislike at that time, they'll see a fiery, unpleasant realm, and they'll complain about that. Now, a lot of the American Indians, they talk about the happy hunting ground. And if they die thinking of animals, they will be reborn as an animal. But if they see other relatives that had already died, then if they die at that time, they'll be reborn in the human realm. When they take the precepts, if they die at that time, there will be devas that come down and collect them on a chariot and take them to a devaloka. So it's real interesting being around people as they're dying to see if they have any visions, and you can help them to uplift their mind. And there's all kinds of wonderful things that happen. Especially if the family understands what you're doing. There have been instances where the family was a long way away. I was in with a person that was dying, helping them have an uplifted mind. And the family would walk in, and I'm a stranger to them. And they go, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm just visiting for a moment." And I would get up and leave because they wanted to do their own private things with the person that was dying. This one lady in particular had cancer of the brain, which is extremely painful. But she was in a coma, but she still had an awful lot of pain. So I'd spent the whole morning with her. Getting to be about lunchtime is when she died. But I'd spent the whole morning with her. I knew the family a little bit, and I started getting her to remember when she did really kind things and had happy, laughing times with her family and her generosity, and she was pretty well prepared with an uplifted mind. So when the family came in, I started getting all these negative vibes from them. They didn't want me there, and that's fine. I don't care. So I got up and left. Started walking down the hallway. I was in the hallway alone. There was no other person around me. Somebody tapped me on the shoulder. And it was just like that. And I turned around and immediately became happy. That lady had died at that time. And it was her way of thanking me. So there's all kinds of wonderful things that, and you can see all kinds of miracles happen when you keep loving kindness in your mind as much as you can. When my mother died, this is a few years ago now, she was the most compassionate person. I mean, she was my model for compassion. When my father and mother were alive, they never argued. They never raised their voices at each other. I lived a very happy childhood because of it. So she was, and she spent all this time working with all of these different people and giving them relief and helping them. And she's very, very compassionate, and she was the boss. So anybody she hired, she insisted that they have fun while they're working and have these people that are incredibly lonely spend time talking to them and laughing with them and joking with them. And as a result, as you went to the nursing home, you could feel that loving kindness coming out of the building. Because everybody that was there, even if they had a lot of pain and suffering, it didn't hurt as much because they were sure that they were being loved. I went to another nursing home to see what it was like, and it was terrible. People were not having fun, they weren't practicing loving kindness, and you could feel the dissatisfaction coming off of the workers. They had to clean bedpans, they had to give them baths, they had to take care of them in whatever way. And they were mostly working for minimum wage. So they weren't happy campers, and you could certainly feel that as soon as you walked in the place. It was like, oh, I don't want to be here. But as my mother was dying, she was having trouble breathing. So she was making a lot of noise while she was breathing, but every time I got around her, I started radiating a feeling of total acceptance of what's happening in the present moment with equanimity. Now, on the day that she died, we were with other family members. There was about 15 people there because she was a matriarch of the family. And they were all sitting around feeling sorry, mostly for themselves, and feeling helpless. There's nothing they can do, so I thought the best thing I can do is just radiate equanimity so they had a balanced mind. They weren't sad, my mother was 94 years old. Of course she's gonna die. But there was nobody crying. There was no confusion about what was happening. Everybody was accepting And there was a little chit-chat, nonsense type, just talking. And when she died, she just stopped breathing. That was it. And about between 5 and 10 minutes later, everybody was very quiet, very respectful. And my sister-in-law said, I don't know whether to smile and be happy or cry. And I said, it doesn't matter now. It doesn't affect Mom. She's gone to a different place. And I was sure that she was in one of the Deva Lokas, because her whole life was a life of compassion and helping other people and buying boxes and boxes of food and leaving them on people's doorstep, things like that. That was the way she lived. So I was sure that she was reborn in a nice heavenly abode. But the whole family was affected just because I was radiating equanimity and acceptance of whatever it was. So use your mind in a positive way, but it takes practice. And it's not just sitting practice. It's everyday practice. I'm trying to get you to smile all the time. Why? Because that improves your mindfulness. When your mindfulness is good, you will notice when your mind starts to get caught in some kind of thing, and then you can use the 6 R's and let it go. And you won't get caught up in your emotional tendencies of fear and anxiety and dislike and sadness, depression. This is a tool that works. And I have absolute confidence in it. I know it works because I've seen it work so many times before.
Maybe it's off topic, but when you're speaking of dying, could you say something about the Buddhist view of giving organs away when you die for transplantation?
It's up to you. That's a personal gift. That doesn't have anything to do with Buddhism.
Okay, so okay.
But if you're a practiced meditator and you have a calm mind, whoever gets those organs that you give away, they're going to develop that calm mind. Again, a monk uses things in common with his virtuous companions in his holy life. Without making reservation, he shares with them any gain of a kind that accords with the Dhamma and has been obtained in a way that accords with the Dhamma, including even the mere contents of his bowl. So too, this is a principle of cordiality that creates love and respect and conduces to unity. Now there's a practice that monks can do. It's not an easy practice, but it's a practice in generosity. And the way that you do it, you have to do it unbroken, in other words, every day. And you go out on alms round and collect your food. When you come back, you show the food to the abbot. He takes whatever he wants. The next senior monk, he takes whatever he wants. The next senior monk, like that, because everything goes on seniority in Buddhism. Let's say I was doing that and I ran out of food. Then I would go back on alms round and collect food again, and then give the abbot the first choice, and then next senior monk and next senior monk, until everybody in the monastery had food. Now you have to go and ask permission from the head monk, and he has to agree, but you have to do this every day for 12 years. The trick is you can't have any remorse. Sometimes monks can be kind of not so nice, and you can't give that monk food and then think later, I shouldn't have done that. So the advantages of doing that is it doesn't matter where you are. You can be in the middle of the desert without another person around, or you can be out in the ocean with another person, without another person around. But when it got time to eat your meal, you open up the bowl and there's food in your bowl. So there's real advantage to doing that. But if you have one thought of remorse, you lose the advantage. You have to start all over again. The Buddha said sharing food is so important that if you saw how important sharing food is, you would never eat alone. You'd always share your food with someone else. So this practice of generosity, I've only known one monk that did that for 12 years. And it was great going out on an alms round with him, because I would always get a whole bunch of stuff too. But I have good food karma. When I went to Indonesia this last year, I got to the house, it was almost time for lunch. 100 people showed up. And they all showed up with food. And there was a table that was huge. I mean, it was from there to there, filled with food. There wasn't room for anything else. And anytime I get in that kind of situation, I generally wind up being intimidated by so much food that I don't eat very much, and wind up getting hungry in the evening. But that's the way my food karma works. Last year, or the year before, I don't remember, I invited a monk from Sri Lanka to come and spend time with me while I was in Bali. And for breakfast, what I really want is a cup of coffee and sometimes a piece of toast. If my stomach gets nervous, I like to eat a piece of toast so that I don't have a problem. But that's not good enough for them. And I wind up with a whole table of food. And this other monk, he just kept shaking his head. He said, "You get so much food, and it's always the best." So, yeah, I know. Why? Because I offered the food to monks while I was taking care of them every day. And I knew the special foods that they liked. And some of them liked candies and things like that. And I always went out and bought some every day and gave it to them because they liked that. So I did that every day for 2 years. And that boosted my food karma up quite a bit. I have gone out on alms round in America, and I was getting so much food, and people don't understand. They didn't know what I was doing, but I was going out on alms round, and they put something in the bowl, that's fine. If they didn't, that's fine too. I don't care. I was staying in a monastery that had a cook, so whenever I brought food back, I just gave it to them, and then they cooked up whatever it was. But I had to have somebody come along with me because I couldn't carry it all. Sometimes they'd give me, these soups that are in great big cans like that. Well, that'd fill my bowl up. So I'd have somebody come along and just give him to that. And there was no time that I didn't collect food. So my food karma is pretty sweet. And you notice that the food here is reasonably decent. It's not like that at other monasteries, I guarantee. When I go to Germany, they really think that you're supposed to be a vegetarian, but they don't know about vegetarian food. They don't know how to have a balanced meal. And that's rather difficult. But most of the time it's only for 10 days, so it's not a big deal. Or 12 days. They really like potatoes there. Whew. Anyway, practicing one of the Dhutanga practices, that's just ascetic practice for monks, is going up on your alms round with your bowl and only eating what's put in the bowl. So I did that for quite a while, but also I was with other monks that were doing that, and I knew they liked particular kinds of food. If I had that in my bowl, I would put that in their bowl, so they got a nice taste. So practicing giving food comes back to you many, many, many times in amazing ways. It doesn't matter whether you're a monk or not. Just practice your generosity, and you'll start to see amazing things happen with food. So, again, a monk dwells both in public and in private, possessing in common with his companions in the holy life those virtues that are unbroken, untorn, unblotched, unmodeled, liberating, commended by the wise, not misapprehended, and conducive to collectedness. The reason that I insist that you take the precepts every day is not because it's a rite and ritual. It's as a reminder for you to keep those precepts. If you make a mistake during the day, you say something that's not true, or you break one of the precepts in one way or another, then forgive yourself for doing it. Go off by yourself and take the precepts again with the determination you won't break the precepts. Now, taking and keeping the precepts is a kind of protection. And when you do this as a habit, keeping your precepts, when you're ready to meditate, you will have a collected mind very quickly. It brings to mind that one man that had never done any meditation before, but he was very meticulous with keeping his precepts, practicing his generosity, doing those kind of things in his life. After the instructions and the meditation, the first sitting he had was 4 hours, which was pretty remarkable. I wanted to go up and slap him in the back of the head. Oh, I've been forgetting to turn this on, and it really does help. Yeah. So one of the advantages of keeping your precepts without breaking them is that your mind will settle down very easily and you will have a collected mind very quickly. And I highly recommend you take and keep the precepts every day when you get off of retreat, as a reminder. That will lead to your happiness and well-being for a long time. Again, a monk dwells both in public and private, possessing in common with his companions in the holy life that view that is noble and emancipating, leading one to practice in accordance with the complete destruction of suffering. What's that saying here? Practicing the... Oh. Is it noble? Is it emancipating? Does it lead one to practice in accordance with the complete destruction of suffering? How about that? Okay, these are the 6 principles of cordiality that create love and respect, conduce to cohesion, to non-dispute, to concord, and to unity. Of these 6 principles of cordiality, the chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying, is this view that is noble, emancipating, which leads to one who practices in accordance with the complete destruction of craving, of suffering. The 6 R's are it. Right effort. That's what you're practicing. That's why your progress is so good in the meditation. That's why you're starting more and more to realize how your mind works on subtle levels, so you don't get caught by the trickiness of the mind. Just as a chief, the most cohesive, the most unifying part of a pinnacled house is the pinnacle itself, so too these 6 principles of cordiality and the chief is the 6 R's. And how does this view that is noble, emancipating, lead one to who practices in accordance with the complete destruction of suffering? Here a monk gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or an empty hut considers thus, is there any obsession unabandoned by myself that might so obsess my mind that I cannot know and see things as they actually are? So you have to let go of the mental proliferation, don't you? If a monk is obsessed by sensual lust, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by ill will, then his mind is obsessed. If he is obsessed by sloth and torpor, then his mind is obsessed. If he's obsessed with restlessness and anxiety, mental proliferation, then his mind is obsessed. If he's obsessed by doubt, then his mind is obsessed. If a monk is absorbed in speculation about this world, then his mind is obsessed. If a monk is absorbed in speculation about the other world, then his mind is obsessed. If a monk takes to quarreling and brawling and in deep disputes, stabbing others with verbal daggers, then his mind is obsessed. He understands thus, there is no obsession unabandoned in myself that might obsess my mind, that I cannot know and see things as they actually are. My mind is well disposed for awakening to the noble truths. This is the first knowledge attained by him that is noble, supramundane, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this view, do I personally obtain serenity? Do I personally obtain quenching? Sound like 6 R's to me. He understands thus, when I pursue, develop, and cultivate this view, I personally obtain serenity. I personally obtain quenching. This is the second knowledge attained by him that is noble, supramundane, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, is there any other recluse or Brahmin outside the Buddha's dispensation possessed of a view such as I possess? He understands there's no other recluse or Brahmin outside the Buddha's dispensation possessed of this view. This is the third knowledge attained by him that is noble, supramundane, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right view, seeing things impersonally? What is the character of a person who possesses right view? This is the character of a person who possesses right view, although he may commit some kind of offense for which a means of rehabilitation has been laid down. Still, he at once confesses, reveals, and discloses it to the teacher or to a wise companion in the holy life. And having done that, he enters upon restraint for the future. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about monks when they get together, especially the Burmese, is every morning we would do a confession in case we broke a rule that we didn't know. And I did that every day for 2 years. And when I was in Burma before that, I did it for 8 months. You really feel purified when you do a confession, because there's 227 rules. Some of the rules are rather odd, like you never give a Dhamma talk to a person that has a knife in his hands. That's one of the rules. One of the eating rules, you never stuff your mouth so full that your cheeks pucker out. And the measurement they give for that is eat no bigger quantity at one time than a peacock egg, which is about that big. Now that's more than I can put in my mouth at one time. They say it should be about the size of a chicken egg. That's more than I can put in my mouth at one time. So I don't ever have to worry about that. But there's a lot of little tiny rules. You're not supposed to look at another person's bowl while they're eating. You're not supposed to watch another person eat. That's a break in the rules. So there's a lot of little rules, and there's some pretty major ones too. So if we I'd look at another person's bowl, not because I wanted their food, but because I wanted to see how much faster I had to eat, so that it wasn't going to cause me any problems. So doing a confession every day is just another way of, now I feel clean.
What was your rewording of right view?
Impersonal.
Impersonal, okay.
Just as a young, tender infant lying prone at once draws back when he puts his hand or his foot on a live coal, so too that is the character of a person who possesses right view, not taking things personally. I understand thus. I possess the character of a person who possesses right view. This is the fourth knowledge attained by me that is noble, supramundane, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the character of a person who possesses right view? What is the character of a person who possesses right view? This is the character of a person who possesses right view. Although he may be active in various matters for his companions in the holy life, yet he has a keen regard for training in higher virtue, training in higher mind. That means practicing and the jhanas. Yes.
Okay.
What have you been doing since you got here?
Well, I know, I just have never heard that expression.
Well, a lot of it you're never going to hear before. And training in the higher mind. What is the higher wisdom? Seeing things in terms of dependent origination. Just as a cow with a new calf, while she grazes, watches her calf, so too, that is the character of a person who possesses right view. He understands thus, I possess the character of a person who possesses right view. This is his fifth knowledge attained by him that is noble, supramundane, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view? What is the strength of a person who possesses right view? This is the strength of a person who possesses right view. When the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, he heeds it, gives it attention, engages it with all his mind, hears the Dhamma as with eager ears. That's why I told you last night, let go of any wandering thoughts, because you gain great benefit from that sutta that I read last night, as you do with all suttas. He understands thus, I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view. This is his sixth knowledge, attained by him, that is noble, supramundane, not shared by ordinary people. Again, a noble disciple considers thus, do I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view? What is the strength of a person who possesses right view? This is the strength of a person who possesses right view. When the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is being taught, he gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the Dhamma, gains gladness connected with the Dhamma. He understands thus, I possess the strength of a person who possesses right view. This is the seventh knowledge attained by him, that is noble, supramundane, not shared by ordinary people. When a noble disciple is thus possessed of seven factors, he has well sought the character for realization of the fruit of stream entry. Sotapanna. When a noble disciple is thus possessed of these seven factors, he possesses the fruit of the stream entry. That's what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So when I just gave you a brief right view impersonal, it's right what I said, but there are other characteristics. That's an interesting sutta, because not many suttas will actually say, if you practice this way, you will attain stream entry. But because I'm a sneaky monk, I don't tell you these things, but I get you to practice this way. And you become successful. There's little hiccups along the way. One of them is longing for something to happen in a particular way. It's just like you have a good sitting and you break and you want to go out and walk and you come back and you tell yourself, I'm going to have that good sitting again. And that's the furthest thing away from what actually happens. You get restless. Why? Because of that one desire to make it be the way you want it to be, when you want it to be that way. Doesn't work, guys. How many times have you heard me say, before you sit, make the determination, I don't care what happens next. Doesn't matter what happens next. I just don't care. And it has to be real, not just words. You have to not care. My job is only to observe. Okay? Use the 6 R's whenever it's appropriate. But one little tiny thought of, I wonder when it's going to happen. Gone. Doesn't work. It makes you restless. And if you've already had an experience, when you get close to it again, you can't jump at it. You have to not care whether it's getting close or not. That's what disenchantment and dispassion are all about. Okay, I've been talking for quite a while. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
In the second or last paragraph, I talked about gladdening the mind.
Yeah.
What's your verbiage for that?
Uh,
I know that's in the Anapada Sutta, and I just was...
well,
It's not just joy, right? It's...
no, it's being happy that you're learning something. Now,
Part of the smile and 6 R's.
well, it's part of the smile and the 6 R's, having an uplifted mind. The thing is, when you develop listening, you can listen to the same Dhamma talk every day for a week and hear something different that makes you excited about it. You have no idea how many times I give the same Dhamma talk over and over and over and over again. But the definition of a good teacher is being able to do that without being bored by it, and listen closely to what you're saying, and you'll find out all kinds of new stuff. That's the magic of the Buddha's teaching. It's very systematic. And it is fun. There's nothing boring about this practice. I made that one of the forbidden words. I don't want to hear you say, I'm bored. Because what is that really saying? I lost my mindfulness and I'm taking it personally, and it's just the same thing over and over and over again. It's never the same thing. It's always different. Sometimes not big different, but it's never identically the same. One of the things that when I get monks that are Tibetan monks, they are continually coming at me and saying, well, it's almost the same as what I'm practicing. And almost just it counts in horseshoes and grenades. Right? Almost as close but no cigar. But they get indoctrinated in thinking one particular way, and it's very difficult to let it go. Well, you ought to go see this teacher. He teaches almost the same thing as you do. And I know if I went to that teacher and talked to him, we're miles apart. Which is fine. We can be miles apart. We can have our own opinions and ideas, but we don't have to fight about it. And that's one thing that a lot of people that are practicing meditation as laymen, they get caught up in the idea that my way is right and any other thing that you say it's just wrong, doesn't work. So it's a real interesting path. See, when I came back from Asia, I had found this. I had practiced it for 3 or 4 years, intensively. And I came thinking, well, I'm going to go to Barre, Massachusetts, and they're going to hear what I have to say, and they're going to really like it. Wrong. They're all closed in by, you got to do it this way. And that's not the way you learn Dhamma. You have to be open to some suggestions. Test it, see if it works. I've done a lot of different kinds of meditation because I was curious enough to see where it leads. And the one-pointed concentration, which Vipassana actually is, does not lead to the same end result as what the Buddha was talking about just in this one sutta. So, no sense in fighting about it or arguing about it. I had one Mahayana man. He was a former monk, and he disrobed, and he was teaching in University of, I think it was Florida, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was Oklahoma, I don't remember. And he heard me talking about smiling and the advantages of smiling. And at the end of the discourse, he comes up to me and he said, you know, the Buddha didn't really teach smiling. And I said, oh? Doesn't it say in some of the literature that we're the happy ones? He said, yeah, it says that. Is it an expression of being happy, smiling? Yes, but he didn't teach smiling. Okay, no problem. It's real interesting because a lot of the Mahayana Buddhism is being taught in universities. And I had some people that were students that were going to universities and they took Buddhism as their class. And they started saying, well, it doesn't say that in the sutta. Here, I'll show you. And the teacher didn't like that at all. So they came running to me and saying, what am I supposed to do with this? I know that they're giving me bad information. I said, if you want a good grade, give them what they want, but you don't have to believe it. So, this is all a very personal type of practice. And when when you're not at a retreat, it's okay to experiment. As long as, I don't care whether you do yoga or not, you gotta smile, you gotta use the 6 R's. What are you doing with yoga? Stretching your body. But you're also developing one-pointed concentration. The 6 R's helps you to let go of that tightness. And actually you become much more flexible. So, any other question?
Bhante,
Yes,
would it be appropriate to ask you a question about the Kosambyia Sutta from last night?
that's fine.
What is the danger in a neither pleasant nor painful feeling? Is it because of the ignorance so that it's not noticed?
It's indifference. It's the lack of mindfulness, of noticing.
So you don't even, just it goes by and you don't even notice it?
Yeah. There's danger in that. Why? Because you're not 6-Ari.
You don't see what's going on here?
You don't see what's going on. Yeah.
I was interpreting that because I struggled with that one for a long time. And my interpretation of the danger was that it's the potential danger that it would become a feeling and would then create lust.
Well, but that is neither pleasant nor painful. The danger is indifference, because there is no mindfulness. When there is equanimity, there is no danger in it. Okay? Yeah.
Is there like a hierarchy in terms of certain acts that generate karma, I guess, good karma? So like some acts generate...
Well, just in generosity to other beings. If you feed animals, you give them food, that comes back to you 100 times. Okay, in all different ways. If you share food with somebody that it isn't very virtuous, but you do it in a way where you're giving not to support his lack of virtue, but as a human being and helping out. If you give with that kind of mind, it comes back 1,000 times. If you give to a virtuous person with a happy mind, it comes back 10,000 times. If you take the refuges seriously, the good merit you get from doing that will come back 1,000,000 times. If you take and keep the 5 precepts without breaking them, it will come back immeasurable amounts of times, maybe like 10 million times. And it's not necessarily in this lifetime, it'll keep coming back. If you give to a monk who has attained at least Sotapanna, you can't count how many times that good merit comes back. So, practice your generosity with all of those different ways of doing it. And the merit that comes back is good.
It's not just giving food, it's also other ways.
Practicing your generosity. What are you doing when you radiate loving kindness to someone else? You're practicing your generosity. That will come back to you a lot of times. I think that's in the, if I'm not mistaken, the Anguttara Nikaya, but it also might be in here.
Yeah, it's 141.
It,
Exposition of the offerings.
Oh, I haven't read that in so long.
It's worth 100 times.
Yeah. Oh, I should do 140. That's sweet. That's the exposition of the truth, is the 141. Exposition of offerings, 142. I'll have to read it later. I don't want to do the whole thing now. Anyway, any other question?
The last one.
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit more detail what it means to take refuge?
Taking refuge means showing high respect and honor to the teacher, to the teaching, and to the community of monks that keep the teaching alive. It's another way of, well, this is how you become a Buddhist, by taking the refuges. Okay? But it's another way of realizing that the teacher was the Buddha, but it's also you, because you're your teacher. He was a guide. He was the supreme guide as far as I can see. But it always comes down, and the Buddha says it often, it always comes down to you teaching yourself and respecting that Dhamma, immediately effective, to be practiced by the wise. Now, in this country, there's an awful lot of talk about the Sangha as just the community of lay people. Actually, there's 10 kinds of Sangha. There's the monk Sangha, there's the lay people Sangha, and for each of the different levels of awakening, that's a particular kind of Sangha. If you're a Sotapanna, that's one kind of Sangha. If you're a Sotapanna with fruition, that's another kind of Sangha. So altogether, there's 10 kinds of Sangha. I'm an unusual monk because how many American monks do you know that have 30 years as a member of the Bhikkhu Sangha? Yeah. And in the world, there's probably, of Westerners, there's probably 300 or 400. There's really not very many Western monks. And certainly not that are Teras, which means 10-year monks. A lot of the Western, when they become monks, they'll do it for a couple of years and then they find out how hard it is and then they disrobe.
What's the Bhikkhu Sangha? What's that mean?
It's a Sangha of bhikkhus.
that like a
Monks.
branch?
Monks.
Okay. I thought it was like a
Bhikkhu is monk. When Buddhism started getting popular in this country, the people that were making it popular didn't like the idea of Western monks so much. So they started talking about the Sangha being the community of people practicing.
Is there any sense in refuge of protection? Like when you're a refugee?
It is a kind of protection.
That's what as a layperson, that's what I'm trying to figure out what it would mean.
Yeah. I fly a lot. Before I take off, I take the refuges. Before I land, I take the refuges. Haven't had any problems yet. So, okay, why don't we share some merit? May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.